Recording.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's information session about the McMaster Seed Fund. I'm glad to see so much interest in our upcoming round. I'm quickly going to go over the program, discuss eligibility, what the application looks like, what the process looks like, and again, hope to leave ample time for questions and discussion. So first off, what is the McMaster Seed Fund? The MSF, as we call it, was an initiative created by our Office of the Vice President Research, which really the goal is to foster an enhanced culture of innovation entrepreneurship within McMaster. It is meant to be an early pre-seed investment into research-based innovative startup companies that we feel will have significant economic and societal impact. A lot of these early stage companies we see arising out of McMaster research, have this gap where they struggle to get that early stage investment to help them, move forward, transition their breakthroughs into products and services. So we hope to address that gap. To be eligible for the McMaster Seed Fund, there's two key components. One is that a founder of the company or a key employee, but it usually is a founder, is a member of the McMaster community. So that can be a faculty member, McMaster staff, students, alumni. But the second key piece for eligibility is that the company is actually developing McMaster IP. So usually the way this looks is IP has been licensed from McMaster University to the company, and there's a license in place. Sometimes the license is still under negotiation or being, finalized with MILO, but it should be under discussion, or there should be some understanding of what is the IP that is within the company being developed? Is it something that was assigned? That sometimes is the case. Is there know-how there that came out of McMaster? If it's a little bit unsure, this is something you need to discuss with us at MILO, but the typical scenario is it is IP developed within the university that has been licensed into a startup company. We are looking for incorporated companies by the time we would make an investment. So if your company is not yet incorporated, that's fine at the application stage. But if we were to choose you for investment, you would have to have your incorporation done at that point, and we expect you to be a for-profit entity. The application is available online now through the MILO website, and the link is here, and I assume these slides will be provided later. And I'm just going to go through quickly the four main sections of this application and what it is we're looking for. In the team section, obviously, as I've described regarding the eligibility, at least one member must be McMaster affiliated. And really what we prefer is that there are going to be at least 2 employees dedicated to this company after the investment is made, if not already. And you should be able to summarize what the roles of these team members will be. You can include advisors in this section. So if you have some key advisors who've been supporting your startup to date, we want to hear about them as well. And we do understand that sometimes without any early stage funding, you may have sort of key members or founders waiting in the wings wanting to join once there is additional investment to help the company grow. So you can explain that in your application as well. The big section around the technology obviously is where we want you to describe, what is the IP, what is the McMaster technology or knowledge that you're developing. This can be a brief description, but you should definitely cite key references and describe your IP position. So ideally include patent numbers. Tell us what is your patent at the application stage? Is it issued? If there is no patent, is there some other type of IP protection, or what is the IP strategy? We will ask you what your technology readiness level is. We're looking for things that are a minimum of TRL 4. So they've had validation in a laboratory environment. To understand this readiness scale, I've provided a link here as well. And really, when you're describing your technology, try to hit on what is unique and the differentiating aspect of it. And also, what is the problem you are trying to solve here? with your technology? Have you identified and validated that problem? And that sort of leads into the market opportunity section. So here we're really asking you, have you, as I said, validated the problem you're trying to address? How have you done that? Who have you spoken to? Have you done primary research? What is your estimate of the market opportunity here? And who are the competitors that are in this sector? A thorough competitive analysis is preferred in this section. We find a lot of times, new companies that come through this application process, this is a bit of a gap. They haven't yet addressed their market. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on about a lot of opportunities that are available to you. If you're realizing as you go through the application, maybe I'm not ready for investment or for this funding opportunity because I have not done this yet. There are ways to start working towards this goal. We also obviously ask some information about your venture. How much has been invested to date or received through grants, non-diluted funding? What are the overall goals, vision, and mission of the company? And it's good to know what your long-term exit strategy or strategies are. We will ask you for a budget. What is the amount you're requesting? And what will you do with that budget? What are the milestones you're setting? And, we'll be assessing if the budget is feasible to accomplish those milestones. And really, what are your plans for follow-on investment or fundraising? Because we realize this is a small step towards a bigger goal. Can you leverage the money that you ask for from the McMaster Seed Fund? And what ideas do you have to do so? We have in the past allowed asks higher than this amount, but we are capping the asks at 250 going forward. This was based on, several consultations with our external committee members and our board. And the advice was that we want to invest in more opportunities rather than fewer, and increase everybody's chances of success. So the process is fairly straightforward. Our application is due March 24th to myself, but I highly recommend if you're considering applying and you have not started a conversation with a business development team at MILO to reach out as soon as possible, because we can discuss with you your eligibility. And, I really don't want people to go through this application process if they end up not being eligible in the end. But also if there are aspects that there, are a few gaps that you think a little bit of help a little bit of help from the MILO team will allow you to get the application in good stead. Certainly we can help over the next couple of months. Once the application is submitted, that's the point where MILO kind of reviews for completeness, eligibility requirements and whatnot. And those that are, adequately complete will be forwarded to our external committee with people like Evelyn. So that external committee is made up of a lot of investors like Evelyn, but also experts in different industry sectors because we are industry agnostic. We are taking applications from all faculties across the university. So we've had to, reach into our network to find a really diverse and knowledgeable group of reviewers. So this committee review the applications and, information that we provide, and they do sort of an initial assessment. And this first phase, what we typically do is kind of divide our committee up by expertise into sometimes 2 to 4 groups, depending how many applicants we have that have reached this stage. And this smaller group of the committee, usually 4 or 5 people, will listen to a smaller subset of companies that are specific to that sector. And out of those, they will make a recommendation to us as to who they think we should do further diligence on and bring to a second pitch. These finalists have obviously addressed most of those things I mentioned here well and have given a strong pitch, been able to answer questions well. And obviously the external committee sees high potential in these companies. So those that are invited back for the second diligence meeting, typically it's been 4 to 6 companies that make it to this stage. We'll meet a larger group of the investment committee who will, watch them do another pitch. They'll have to address things that came up in that first round, and they'll ask a lot of questions. After that second meeting, our external committee makes recommendations to McMaster on who they feel we should invest in this current round. This all should take place probably in May, we're hoping for. So we target early May for that first pitch session, and within a couple of weeks, the second final session and the decision process. So hopefully, targeting end of May, June, we will be starting to talk to the companies that we want to invest in. And at this stage, as I mentioned, they need to be incorporated. Obviously, they'll have to have a bank account in place, a shareholders agreement, a cap table. And we are basically going to negotiate with them an investment agreement. So this is not a grant, it's an investment. We are awarding up to $250,000 in exchange for equity. Because most of these companies at this stage are very early and it's difficult to put a company valuation on them, we do not know how much equity that investment is worth. So what we're doing is offering safe agreements. These are simple agreements for future equity. It's a mechanism that a lot of early stage investors use, where we're basically saying, here's our investment. We don't know how much equity it's worth right now, but when you get a priced round later on, you have another investor come in and put a valuation on your company. That is when this will trigger equity in the company for McMaster. Not every situation is the same. We have had times where companies are already getting a valuation from another investor and our equity is then triggered right away. We do ask that the investment be released in tranches. So this is, based on experience, as we've done this over the years, we will release an amount of the investment to get the company going right away upon signature. And we agree on milestones over, the next 1 or 2 years. The shorter time, the better to get the investment out, typically within a year, to get the investment released. We don't just walk away then and say, see you later. We really are intent on following the progress of the companies we've invested on. We want to see them succeed. We check in quarterly. We do have some reporting requirements. But really what we're doing with these check-ins is it's not trying to make work for anybody. It's to, help you see where there's barriers, find people in our network who might be able to help you, meet with executive in residence, introduce follow-on investors, funding opportunities, strategic partners, anything we feel that could support you in your journey. Obviously, we have limited funding. We've been funding 2 to 3 companies a year typically. And a lot of times, there's various reasons why this McMaster Seed Fund may not be a fit for your new company. It could be that the technology is a little bit too early. You need to do quite a bit more validation or proof of concept before it's ready to be invested in. Certainly, MILO can help you find alternative grant resources. There's a lot of commercialization grants opportunities to access non-diluted funding that would help you get to the stage where you may be investment ready. A lot of times the technology looks really great, but either the team is not quite ready, there's maybe one person who wants to develop a new company and no support identified, or the market really hasn't been validated. So we definitely recommend, if that's the case, to work with a lot of the sort of educational resources that are available to you to further validate your market. And I'll talk again a little bit more about that in a minute. Very rarely is it because the new company doesn't fit with MSF objectives, like it's not a scalable or venture backable company, for example, but we can certainly help with intros to other investors and accelerators that are a better fit for your opportunity. And I just want to reiterate, it is a competitive process. So, you will hear no a lot of times as you start a company and start seeking investment. And I really think this is a valuable learning process for anybody who is, just beginning this startup journey. It's a wonderful group of reviewers that we have that provide substantial feedback. And it's probably one of the more friendlier pitches you'll have to do to a group. We've made 10 investments so far through the McMaster Seed Fund, and we're really happy to see a lot of them meeting the milestones that they've set out. A few have gone on to achieve follow-on investment, and as I said, our equity has been converted. So yeah, we hope to continue to grow and succeed with some of you. Here, I just want to mention, again, if you're not quite ready for investment, or if through this process you realize you still have some work to do, there's a lot of great opportunities available to you in the McMaster ecosystem. The Forge is our campus-linked accelerator that offers programs for students through their Startup Survivor program, but also through early-stage companies through their business incubator, who, get wonderful opportunities to develop their business plan further. Lab to Market is a national program that's now up and running. McMaster is going to be hosting several cohorts over the coming years. One of their programs called Validate, the specific goal of that program is to help you validate your market. So if you're at that stage where you haven't taken that step yet, this is a way for students that may be part of your team to get a stipend to actually spend substantial time on that validation step. A later Lab to Market program is called Launch. Again, provides student stipend for a team member from a startup who can, further the startup development through the Launch program. Lab to Market provides mentors, facilitators, resources from across the country to help with these steps. We have the clinic and its associated programs through the Marnix Hearsing School here at McMaster. The clinic supports a lot of health innovators, people who are aspiring to be innovators in the health sector and are looking for support at the idea stage, at the entrepreneurial education stage, and they have a lot of great programs as well. The McMaster Entrepreneurship Academy is a suite of programs to support McMaster entrepreneurs, faculty members, grad students, postdocs, a lot of different offerings through the MEA. And I'm just mentioning one here. There's an Innovation Matchmaking Day coming up March 25th. Again, for those who might not be ready for investment at this stage, but maybe some non-diluted funding, the goal of this funding program is to fund teams who are brought together. One team member might have a clinical problem that they've identified and validated, and the other may have a solution to that problem, some kind of technical engineering software skills that could support a team in developing an innovation around the problem identified. There's $75,000 worth in funding towards teams that are brought together through this program. And I highly encourage anyone who has an interest to attend this sort of speed dating meet and greet session later in March to start thinking about putting an application together. Finally, we're very happy to be launching a student seed fund this year. So if there are students on the call who are realizing perhaps they're not eligible because they're not developing McMaster IP, for example, the student seed fund is for students developing their own IP and or McMaster IP. And they want to access mentorship and support through our programs. The Student Seed Fund provides $10,000 in funding, but also dedicated mentorship over a period of a few months to help you reach milestones and move forward with your startup. So tons of opportunity. If McMaster Seed Fund's not right for you, or in addition to, I hope you'll look into these programs. I went through that very quickly, but again, I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions and discussion. I feel like there's quite a bit potentially in the chat here. So I am going to stop sharing, and maybe Sydney could spotlight myself and Evelyn for answering the questions. Sydney, have you been tracking the chat, or should I go in and start from the beginning?
Yeah, I think some of the questions have been answered already. But I will maybe ask you to first dive in more regarding the IP and the expectations for McMaster to own intellectual property.
Okay, sorry. Was there a specific question around that, or?
That's the question. Will the company own the IP, or expectation is for McMaster to own the IP?
Okay, so typically when IP is developed at McMaster, for those who aren't aware, our IP policy at McMaster is that it is owned by the Institute. We're an Institute-owned IP policy. But what happens is when somebody wants to start a company is we license the IP exclusively to the startup company and allow them to run with it. It's very, very common for investors to see these types of licenses when they're evaluating startup companies. They understand that the IP was generated in an academic institute. And as long as the company has full right to that IP, there's usually no questions about it. In some cases, we have had companies ask for a full assignment of IP, and that's in very rare instances where, I don't know, for example, an investor or partner is requesting it, and we will consider that at McMaster, if certain milestones have been met and we can feel certain that that company is moving forward with the IP. The reason we're, careful about this is because, as you can imagine, there's many, many startups who fail and who do not succeed, unfortunately. And we would like that IP to come back to McMaster if that were the case. It's very difficult if we have fully assigned it. If we have licensed it, it is possible. So that is the reason why McMaster and most institutes that have an institute IP policy like ours operate this way.
And there's a question around the wording. Is McMaster Seed Fund now a pre-seed fund, not a seed fund? And did anything change relative to the previous editions besides the 250K investment cap?
No real changes, a little bit maybe on our process side in terms of managing the review, but that's, our own internal kind of process. I think it's always been a pre-seed fund, to be honest. We call it McMaster Seed Fund. Maybe Evelyn can comment on this. She sees much later stage things typically at Amplitude, and in her other VC jobs that she's held. Because most of the companies that we have evaluated all along have been prior to investment ready from later VCs, but certainly, on their way. Would you agree, Evelyn?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the tech readiness as well. So the label of seed and pre-seed is just, whether there was any external funding, and the size of that external funding. So some people call it pre-seed, some people call it seed. Sometimes seed stage funding could get very large in the millions, multi-millions. So I think it really depends on the data pack, but you don't have to worry about the label of seed or pre-seed. I think it's really about the data pack that we see, and then we'll make an assessment based on that type of conversation and from the data pack that's shared.
Awesome. Thanks, Evelyn. So there's further clarification being requested. What % of equity is expected for a 250K investment?
So again, that's a little bit hard to answer because it's based on future investors, right? So, as an example, if a later investment came in and it was for 2.5 million was the valuation of the company and we had invested 250, that would be 10%, right? But typically it's going to have a much higher valuation than that. So our equity might drop to 5%, 2%. I'm going to say usually a one-digit equity because most of the companies we're investing in are very high potential and will have, that higher valuation at the next stage of investment.
I would just chime in here. The equity that Leigh mentioned, it's future. So, but if this fund, 250,000, can help unlock some key gating experiments that can help improve the valuation of companies in the future, this is something to consider in terms of, your cap table, future ESOP, which I'm not sure we can talk about that, and in terms of ownership too. So, helping this to unlock additional funding. So sometimes there's match funding for 250 that can unlock, another 250. So it definitely can snowball in terms of that investment in future valuation.
Great. And the next question is how much McMaster has raised for the McMaster Seed Fund. So how big, how many, and how much is the total investment being made this year? For this
Yeah,
round?
so this is something that we're trying to do with the McMaster Seed Fund is have raise external funds. At the moment, we're still relying on our VPR. So there is some discretionary budget with the VPR every year that is being dedicated to the McMaster Seed Fund because it is a high priority for the university. And in the background, we continue to try to figure out how to raise additional funds because we really want a bigger pot. What we want to be able to do is invest in as many opportunities as possible, and that includes like follow-on funding as well. But right now, we are restricted to likely making maximum 3 investments in this coming round. And we don't always invest just because there's money there. We could save it for future years if we don't find opportunities that are ready to be invested in. That hasn't happened yet. We've been fortunate to see some great companies in every round, but that is sort of the thesis behind the fund as well.
And for reviewers too, that's been on for a few years, you can see subsequent applications. So we see year-to-year improvement, you know, what has been accomplished in the last year to really add on to that application. So even if we haven't invested in previous years, we may reconsider, we'll definitely reconsider that in future years based on updates, if there's reapplications.
Great. A quick sidebar question to the Student Seed Fund. Is it open to postdocs and former postdocs as well?
I believe so. Sydney, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, I think there's a limit to the amount of years out of school.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. And then a question about the 250K. Does the equity stake come with a license to McMaster IP, or do we have to provide additional equity stake for IP?
Yes, this is a separate investment from your deal with McMaster for your IP. So that license that you negotiate with MILO is a separate thing. Whether it involves equity or not depends on the situation and what you negotiate. So this is separate from that.
Great. I'll continue to ask the questions about IP. So to assign the IP to the company, does the company need to pay for that process?
Not necessarily. Again, those are sort of one-off situations where we've done assignments. And it's not a payment. It's again, some milestones have been met. A lot of times it's the follow-on investment came through or something along those lines. That gives us that sort of sense of security that things are going well. The company's, off to the races with the IP and doing well. But again, it's not typical.
And is there a typical discount rate applied in the SAFE agreements, or is this negotiable?
There is a discount rate. It's a little bit up in the air at the moment. We've had a lot of advisors come in and tell us we may need to change our SAFE terms a little bit, but there will be a discount rate that there's maybe a little bit of negotiation room around.
Great. And the last question here is, can you describe the due diligence process further, please?
Sure. So as I said, there's an initial vetting process done by MILO where it's just looking for the kind of, that enough information is provided, it's adequately written to go to our committee. Our committee members like Evelyn will review those applications and the pitch session. And that's really a vetting process to, their initial reaction, their initial impressions of companies that could be possibly ready for investment, and we'll ask them to come back. In between that time, the companies are given a chance to address a lot of gaps that might have been identified in the first stage. And we try to get experts in some of the areas that they were questioned on to provide additional information that we provide to our committee. We also are trying to get some student support with investment memos this round as well, with students who are being trained in diligence. So there will be a fair amount of information package provided to the committee members who we then rely on for their expert advice to provide. I don't know, Evelyn, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, happy to chime in here. So I think we all review the packages, and they're very detailed packages. So there's two components for the most part when we see it. There's an application, which is fairly lengthy document that's supplied using the McMaster template. It does, some companies will provide a lot more detail in that free-form document, you know, detailed information on contracts, budgets, you know, what has been done so far, data pack, and then that is thoroughly reviewed by every reviewer. So we will go in with those questions as well, because we've read that material. And there's the pitch itself. I would say the audience for your pitch is, it's going to be scientists and they're entrepreneurs. They know the space very well. So I would say it doesn't need to be, it's not for a lay audience. It will be for a technical audience. So in your pitch, and we all are under CDA, we are adhere to this disclosures. The more you can discuss in your pitch and in your application, the more we can help advise you and to help make a more informed decision. So in that 10-minute pitch, it's very short, you have a lot of data to cover, but I would say keep it as detailed as you can. That way we can have a more fulsome discussion, and anything that isn't covered in the 10-minute pitch, please keep it in the presentation in the appendix, because we may come up and ask you, how did you, size the market? How would you price this going forward? What would be the unit economics of your product based on the market? What are some detailed information on your competitive landscape and how you seek differentiation? For therapeutics, what are some dose response and benchmarking data available? And how do you see yourself in terms of entering lines of therapy? So it does get very technical, and it will be a technical audience. So I would advise on having your pitch being for a technical audience and not for a lay audience.
That's great advice. Thanks, Evelyn.
Wonderful. Those are all the questions. Oh, I just see one more coming in. Yes, definitely keep them coming. So I see the list of the example investment in the slides. Are most health and tech? Does it mean a priority on health tech?
No, absolutely not. I think that there just happens to be quite a few more applicants, and the first few rounds were that type of company. We were happy to see, a bit of a flip to a lot more kind of engineering, manufacturing related, those types of things in the last round. Some were not quite ready. We're hoping they're working towards being ready for this round or future rounds. But certainly we are very keen to see all kinds of different companies put forward applications.
Agreed. I would say the expert review panel will have a broad coverage. So even my area is in therapeutics and healthcare med tech. There are definitely others on the panel that are very in tune with various industries and engineering and deep tech. I think we saw some applications in the past as well. So it would definitely be a broad range of reviewers, and I'm sure Leigh and the team will source additional experts as we go.
Wonderful, thank you. There's lots of thanks in the chat as well. I just wanted to make it clear, there was a question at the beginning. Can you just answer whether or not-for-profits are eligible?
Not for this particular opportunity, but as I mentioned earlier, we definitely have lots of other great opportunities for people who are trying to develop not-for-profit opportunities to access. So please reach out. We can point you in the direction of something that would be more appropriate.
Wonderful. Thanks, Leigh. Thanks, Evelyn. Those are all the questions. I'll leave it with you.
Okay. I don't know, Evelyn, if you had anything else you wanted to add that we didn't cover in this brief chat. Any of your perspectives that you think might help some applicants here on the call?
Yeah, so really know your market and differentiation. Who uses and who pays comes up in every pitch. So really know, if it's a patient or a doctor that's using it and they may not be the person who pays, who are the ultimate customers and the buyers of your technology? That is a key question, because the pricing pressure as well as the competitive landscape all comes from that type of information. And this is across all industries, not just in healthcare. So that will be a key question for the panelists.
Yes, that's a good one to flag for sure. I'm trying to think if there's any other key advice to offer. I do think that having sort of a bit of a roadmap in your mind of where you're going to go with this investment and other fundraising opportunities that you're aware of that you can leverage this with is great for us to see, because that's certainly one of our key metrics and things we want to see is this money to multiply and provide a lot of value. You were going to
I
chime in
just
on that,
thought of it.
Evelyn?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay.
No, you brought up a great point. So I sit on other type of review committee for grants, and I think the milestone, I don't think we talked about much about that. And the panelists and the reviewers certainly talk about how does this money help unlock the next step of the company and the technology where you weren't able to kind of access funding before. So these may be key experiments, go, no go decisions. The use of proceeds sometimes may be for personnel use, but sometimes it's for data and data generation experiment use, and how you want to stage that. And so that's looking at your ability to look at the roadmap, like Leigh has mentioned, but also capital allocation going forward. If this technology or this experiment failed, what will be the next step to help mitigate that, or think about, are there other ways to kind of support the company going forward? So it's just more of a long-term strategy planning. And the panelists do discuss that and on the use of proceeds and what would this 250 unlock.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can't off the top of my head think of any key pieces of advice. I hope we've covered a lot of the questions that you may have, but I think Sydney put in the chat there, startups@mcmaster.ca is an email to, send any questions you might have. And if you don't already have somebody at MILO who you work with closely, reach out to discuss your eligibility and, any advice that can be offered as you prepare the application. Okay, a couple of questions from Hassam here, right?
Yeah.
Runway timeline. I mean, hopefully you've got the next year mapped out that you can quickly turn this around, and we don't want to be hanging on to the tranches for a long time. So we want to release these funds as quickly as possible to get your company going. So I would definitely keep it a shorter timeline. And can additional funds be used, meaning matching funds and grants and things? I mean, we assume so. We hope that you're going to be matching this with other resources.
So I would say at least a 2-year horizon, but I would say be realistic because of tariffs and other delays. So you never really know. The Canadian dollar's not doing well. So just manage that expectation and any anticipated hurdles. And if there are hurdles like tariffs, what are some risks and mitigation in terms of planning those experiments? If you have CRO in the States, can you find one in Canada? And again, leveraging SHRED. I hope there's a SHRED talk, Leigh. Mitigation based on that type of strategy, but stay realistic in terms of the timeline and,
Yeah, I think, Evelyn, are you sort of describing the timeline to get to their next investment, let's say?
I would say, so normally timelines could be up to 18 months. It depends on how you define timelines and the company growth. So if it's unlocking one set of experiments, is that 6 months? Is it a year? Shorter, longer? But hopefully the amount that you see here would help unlock and release the stage of the company to a more partner readiness or onto market readiness stage.
I mean, our dream scenario is that within a couple of years, the companies we've invested in are, getting additional investment, key partnerships, revenue generation, depending what sector they're in. But again, as Evelyn says, in these times, we do need to be realistic, but figuring out a way to stretch the funds and leverage them is really important. And yes, we should have a SHRED talk for everybody.
More than ever.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm happy to give everyone back 15 minutes of their day. Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us. Your advice and insight's been really helpful. Again, please reach out with additional questions. And I think Sydney said she was going to post this video or the slides when needed. And good luck, everybody. If you are submitting an application, please reach out for any support you might need. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.